The Dark Mage is a fragile but dangerous spellcaster. He possesses Tornado 2, an area of effect spell, and Freeze 1, a spell capable of inflicting heavy damage on our non-casters, who possess no resistance to ice magic. Given the opportunity, he can and will wreak havoc amongst densely packed characters. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Let's Play Shining Force 3. My name is TotalBiscuit and this is Battle 5 in the Dwarf Valley. Now, this particular fight is not remotely difficult in any way, shape, or form, even though we're encountering a new enemy by the name of the Dark Mage, who has a variety of unpleasant spells that he can use. Now, for some reason in this fight, I don't know if it's the specific fight or whether or not it's just some issue with the Dark Mage's scripting, they don't tend to use their AoE spell when appropriate. I mean, there are times in this fight when they could be hitting 3 to 4 characters with a Tornado 2 and doing immense amounts of damage. But they don't do that. They prefer to use Freeze 1, which is a single target spell, which is heavy damage, don't get me wrong. But it just seems like it's got an awful lot less utility than Tornado 2 would when we've got quite a few characters packed together. But never mind, I'm not going to complain about that. We'll certainly run into enemies later on that don't have that particular flaw. Now, the interesting thing about this fight is what you can just see up there in the top right-hand corner. It's a ruin, and inside this ruin, there is a treasure chest, and we can't get that by the traditional means. There's a specific way in which you have to actually get inside that ruin and claim what is inside it. It's not just a case of running in there and grabbing what's in the chest. It's a little bit more complex than that. It's kind of like a little bit of a mini-game that they've put into Shining Force 3, and we will encounter 6 of these dungeons, I believe, if I remember correctly, in Scenario 1, and there are also dungeons in Scenarios 2 and 3, and some of the best items in the game come from these dungeons. I'm going to be showing you what happens with that a little bit later on, because, like I said, there's a specific procedure that you have to follow in order to get anything from there. Now, you just saw Freeze 1, and Freeze 1, especially against melee characters like Dantes, is dangerous. They don't have the resistance to deal with it. They will get a little bit later on, but generally speaking, magic-using characters get more magic resistance than non-magic-using characters. And Dantes in particular has no magic of any kind, and that's his big Achilles heel. You can pump his defense up as much as you like. He can have 40 HP, 50 HP, massive amounts of defense so that he's not taking any damage from ranged or melee characters. But when a spellcaster comes along, they'll cut through him like a hot knife through butter. And we do have to watch out for that. What we will probably be doing later on is trying to get him a friendship with Grace, which will allow him to gain some magic resistance. What I will say, though, is we don't generally have Grace too close to Dantes, who is often out either on the flank or further up in the field, and that's not where we want Grace to be, because she can get picked off very easily. Now, these snipers have become less dangerous since the last battle, the same reason anything else does, because we've got higher defense, but there are a lot of them, and you can be caught unawares. They have surprisingly high movement speed for standard kind of infantry units, so if you're not careful, if you're not watching yourself, you can be caught, and you can get your spellcasters and weaker characters nailed by snipers, which is not particularly pleasant. Now, there is another sniper character on this map, and I haven't bothered to put him in the base Jerry because he doesn't have any special abilities in particular, but he's the commander sniper. He's got higher HP and he does more damage. That's the basic two differences. Now, in this case, we've got a character that, when defeated, will end the fight, and we're going to see what happens when we end a fight without killing everything when we get to the end of this one. Now, Dantes is pretty low on health, but I'm not too worried because there aren't any other enemies within range of him. We're going to be sending him into the ruin. And this is going to be a common theme as we do these ruined dungeons. We send in the fast-moving characters. Why? Well, you're going to see that a little bit later on. Okay, I think it's time to show off some of this AoE magic that we managed to get last time. This is Blaze Rank 2. Now, there are 2 kinds of AoE in this game. There's the standard kind of AoE that does a set amount of damage to each person it hits. And there's also a second kind of AoE called Summon AoE. And that has a specific amount of damage that it does in total, and depending on how many characters it hits, it spreads the damage throughout, which is not too great, but it does have a lot of utility for taking out the harder boss characters and particularly tough enemies. if you target it right and you just hit one person with it. We're not going to be seeing summon magic until a lot later in the game. Now, I'm going to skip forward a few turns here because it's a large battlefield and it takes a little bit of time to go where we need to go. What I want to show you particularly is this ruin here. Now, in order to get into a ruin, you must possess the map, otherwise you can't go in there entirely. That's like the key. Now, inspecting the ruin takes 1 turn. Yeah? You can't enter it with the character you inspected with it on that same turn. We're going to be skipping ahead to the next turn in just a moment. Now, in every ruin in the game, thieves will try and enter the ruin in order to steal the treasure within, and you have to stop them. Now, I'm going to skip forward 1 turn here to show you the thief. The thief is very kindly hanging around, waiting for us. Now, Dantes has to use an action in order to get in, and there's only 1 entrance. So, we go in and we map move, as we demonstrated in the previous video. That's map move in action. In the meantime, we're going to be fighting on this particular battlefield as well, and I'm hoping that the enemies up there are going to be hanging around and won't try and engage us, but I have the feeling that we're not going to be that lucky. In later battlefields, that can actually present quite a problem, because you're going to have to send in more than 1 character into some of the larger ruined dungeons in order to get all of the good items out of them, which means, of course, you're depleting your force, as well as having to fight a battle on 2 fronts. Now, dungeons and ruins are quite interesting in a number of different ways. You don't necessarily, particularly later on, want all of the items out of them. There are a bunch of chests, and in these chests there are a bunch of different items. Some of them are pretty much useless, as in there might be herbs, healing drops, random consumables that we don't really need, whereas others will be very powerful magical items that are incredibly desirable and we'll definitely want to get a hold of. The reason why this is a problem is the system by which you actually acquire the items. You cannot get into the treasure chests. Well, we'll see the thief right here. The thief is the one that can get into the chest. There's 1 chest in this particular dungeon, and it's to the top left-hand corner, and you'll see it on the next turn. You can't open them. They are locked. The thieves pick the locks and open the chests. The thieves will then try and make off with that treasure, and they will try and leave via a particular exit to the dungeon, and this exit obviously changes because each dungeon looks different. This can be a big problem if you can't catch the thief. What's worse is the fact that they'll only drop 1 item every time you hit them, and that's the way you actually get the items off of them. You hit them. It was a very sneaky piece of design by Camelot, and here's why. The thief uses the sword, meaning that knight character weapons are particularly powerful against them. Now, guess what the fastest moving characters are? Oh yes, that would of course be the knights. Now, here we go. We see the thief opening there, and it found the life ring. Very powerful item, and we want to stop him from escaping the dungeon. You see that's where he's going to go out there, and we'll be using Dantes to do that. Now, you noticed I equipped him with a spear earlier. There's a reason for that, of course, because it's a less powerful weapon. It's not likely to kill him in 1 hit, and it also has the advantage of range. So if we're just out of reach, we can still get the item. We don't have to be in base-to-base contact in order for that to happen. Now, I did hope that they wouldn't do this, but they're going to do that anyway, so we're going to be retreating our characters, hoping that they won't chase, but generally speaking, once the enemies have the scent of you, they will keep coming, and we can't outrun them at this point. Kite there took a pretty hefty amount of damage. He's backing away, and I've just got to have to hope that the Dark Mage doesn't decide to be smart. Now, the Thief Commander, he does do an awful lot more damage, but it's not going to be enough to kill our general, so we're not too worried about that. So let's go back to talking about the dungeon. Now, like I said, they're a bit sneaky. If a thief picks up multiple items, you're only going to get 1 every time you hit him. Now, if you kill him before he drops all of his items, you don't get the rest of the items. You will only get 1 per hit. So if he's got 3 items and you kill him in 2 hits, you're only going to get 2 of those items. And they're going to, if I remember correctly, drop in the order that he picked them up. So that could be a really big problem. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be keeping a weaker spear on Dantes, and later on when we acquire another knight character, we're going to be giving it to them as well, and that's what we're going to be using in order to get the items from them. Now, this dungeon is not remotely complex in any respect. It's a tiny little dungeon. It's very easy to get the item off him, and we're going to grab it right now. However, the later dungeons become an awful lot larger, an awful lot more complex. There are a number of obstacles as well as other enemies that we're going to see in these dungeons which don't actually have anything to do with the thieves, and they don't attack the thieves either, so there's going to be a number of obstructions we're going to have to deal with. Getting all of the items in the later dungeons becomes incredibly difficult, particularly the last dungeon, which is a nightmare to do properly, but it does drop one of the best items in the game, so we're going to be trying to grab that. I'm going to heal up Mascarin, because Mascarin could be easily killed in 1 shot here by any of those characters. We don't want that to happen. the Dark Mage and his amazing AI here. Now, he could have used the tornado, but he didn't. He decided to hit Kite with a stick. Yeah, the AI is questionable at times. There's not even a... we're not even going to discuss that. We've already seen how the AI can do some very smart things and some very stupid things. Scenarios 2 and 3 do improve on it. Now, these multi-front battles are things that I really, really enjoy, and they do it a lot more towards the end with the larger, more complex dungeons. Indeed, the next fight is also going to be a multi-front battle. To some degree. It's not a pure multi-front battle, like, for instance, the penultimate battle we're going to face, which is arguably also the last battle because it's split into 2 parts. You're going to be fighting with the equivalent of 2 forces worth of characters across 2 battlefields at the same time. Now, we're really in the thick of it now, and the game does get a bit harder at this point, just because of the amount of damage that the enemies can actually put out. But it's okay, because we can waste a special on something with 8 HP. Thankfully, the Archer characters aren't anywhere near as useless as they were in Shining Force 1 and 2. Hayward is one of my favourite characters. He can do some great damage, and his range becomes obscene later on in the game. Absolutely unnecessary, but again, 10 XP every time we heal, and a partnership there, even better, which means that Grace can now provide some magic resistance to Kite, which is, again, one of his weaknesses. He's a melee-only character, at least at this level. He does get some magic later on, and his magic resistance does improve a little bit, but getting it early on in the game is pretty important. We certainly don't want him to die to a spellcaster. Okay, now, this thief can't escape. We're going to finish him off just for the sake of finishing off. I'll switch back to the lance. It's not even... we don't even need to, but like I said, the reason we use the spear is partly because of the range thing, and partly because we don't want to kill them in one hit. They have a vulnerability to night weapons, and Camelot did that on purpose, just to make it a little bit trickier. Now, once you eliminate the thieves, the ruin will actually collapse. This will also happen if the thieves manage to escape it, and your character will be kicked out, and that's it. That's pretty much it. You don't have to go in there again. You don't even get the opportunity to go in there again. If I were to restart this battle, for instance, right now, the ruin would still be collapsed. This happens if you fail or if you succeed, so it's a one-shot thing. No point wasting Blaze level 2 there. As I mentioned before, it doesn't do much more damage than Blaze level 1, and we're just going to take him down to the point where we can finish him off with Kite. I'm going to do that right now, just to give Kite the extra experience bonus. It's good to keep him on the bleeding edge when it comes to leveling. I'll finish him off. Now, he's the commander character, so you're now going to see what happens when you kill the commander character when you haven't killed everything else on the field. Sometimes I'll do this, sometimes I won't. Generally speaking, I want to try and get the extra experience from clearing out everything. Now, not only was that the end of Battle 5, but that was actually the end of Chapter 1. 6 chapters in Scenario 1, and I will see you next time when we enter Railhead in Chapter 2.